I came from 34 years in education and then 17 years in housing. And I'm here representing a social housing project in Belleville.
Okay, let's see, Harriet, do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah, I've been, this is like the Hotel California boards for me. I've been on for 13 years and retired from NRC IRAP for 20 some years and still working with Ted on various projects and still on the board of Switch, and also an investment review committee of SOFI, which is FedDev funds for entrepreneurs.
Lena?
Great. Annabelle Mills, I have next. Like to unmute?
You want to unmute?
Unmute. We'll have to.
Sorry about that. I'm a retired French immersion teacher, and I'm deeply concerned about the issue of plastics, and so I've joined you this morning. Great.
David Heineman.
Good morning, all. I'm the president and current board chair for Switch. I'm the chief science officer for a company in Napanee that makes green fire suppression products. Formerly worked at Queens in their industry partnerships group, and I don't drive a Tesla, but I do drive a Leaf. So,
Steve Isco.
I'm a retired biomedical researcher at Queens and longstanding interest in global warming and other environmental aspects. Joined Switch about a year ago. And this morning, my wife and I are going down to a dealer to order a zero emissions vehicle.
Okay, Jane Webster.
Oh, hi. I'm with Smith School of Business at Queens. Although I just retired in July, I'm still doing research. I still have graduate students who are looking for projects. And today I have Antoine with me, who's going to introduce himself later. So I'm really interested in environmental sustainability issues in general, especially around information systems. And I don't own a car, so I'll best the rest of you.
I have Mark Sibley next.
Hi, I'm a retiree from DuPont and Invista, worked in the technical area. I do drive a zero emissions vehicle, and I'm interested in sustainability is my main thing, and I'm here to learn and if I can help.
Carrie Hill.
Oh, hi. I'm a retired biology professor at Queens, and I've watched biodiversity change over the last couple of decades. Climate change is really a serious problem that I've been focused on for many years. And I'm here as an interested audience member.
Great. Welcome. Leon Wasser.
Hi. This is my
Oops, sound is not that great.
Switch in a long time. I represent the Ontario Sustainable Energy Association. I'm chief of biopolicy there. For those of you that are interested, OSEA has a forum immediately following this at 10 o'clock on green exports to Africa. The website for OSEA is ontario-sea.org, ontario-sea.org, and it's a free event. And we also have our next event is Green Energy Doors Open, which Switch is most invited to participate in. So maybe David Hinman, maybe we can have a discussion about that. In my day job, I'm involved in technology development.
Great, thank you. Antoine Grenier-Ouimet.
Good morning, everyone. I'm a PhD student at Queens. I'm working with Jane, who just presented herself earlier. I have interest in green information technologies, so I'm hoping to be able to learn today, but also contribute if I can.
Thank you. Kim McCauley.
Hi, Ted. I'm a chemical engineering professor at Queens with interests in plastics and the environment too.
Thomas Sears.
Good morning, everybody. I'm a PhD student at Queens in the electrical and computer engineering department. Study autonomous robotics and while that doesn't immediately apply to environmental things directly, I'm sure it has lots of applications, but otherwise I'm just a very concerned community member of Kingston.
Michael Barr.
Michael Barre, I'm an ITA or Industrial Technology Advisor with IRAP. I've been involved with the plastics recycling for 20 plus years, either with Natural Resources Canada or NRC. And over the past 3 months, I've had to review 15 different projects involved with the recycling of plastics for either computer plastics or the creation of ceiling tiles or whatever. So I've been into recycling of plastics in a strong way.
Thanks very much. Vicky Shmoka cannot speak, she can only chat, but Vicky is a former city councilor in the city of Kingston, and she is interested in the topic of waste and says hello to everybody. Eric O'Coin.
Hi everyone, I'm Eric. I'm currently the student director for the switchboard and was formerly an engineering intern with Physical Plant Services over at Queens.
Next we have Lynwen Osborne. If you'll have to, yeah, there we go.
Good morning, my name is Lynwen Osborne. I'm the recycling coordinator for the sustainability office at Physical Plant Services at Queen's University. So we have an obvious interest in industry changes and information.
Okay, and then 647-462-5337.
Hi everyone. Sorry, I'm not too sure how to change my name on there. My name is Amy Hopton, and I'm a sustainability intern currently working with the sustainability office at Queen's.
Great. If you send me a message, I can change your name from my screen. Just send me a message on the, oh, you can't do that. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, we'll figure out some other way. Okay, take it away, Harriet.
Okay. Pardon me. Allergies, not COVID. This morning, we're very fortunate to have Ashley Wallace with us. She's the plastics program manager at Environmental Defense. And for those of you that do not know, I think we've put in, Ashley put in the website for Environmental Defense, and they work cross-country doing a lot of valuable lobbying and various other activities to make our environment healthier. She holds a master's degree in environment and sustainability and a Bachelor of Science from Western University. And as I said, Environmental Defense is a leading advocacy organization in Canada, works with government, industry, and individuals to defend clean water, a safe climate, and healthy communities, which is what we're all about at Switch as well. So we're all aware of the global plastic pollution crisis, but how does Canada measure up? Ashley is going to provide some general background on Canada's own challenges and why we need to ditch our linear make, use, dispose economy in favor of a more circular approach. Waste is an issue where all levels of government have responsibility, but for this meeting, Ashley is going to focus on us former federal government people and what the feds should be doing to ensure harmonization and zero waste from coast to coast to coast. As Mike said, I, in my post-retirement, worked for 2 years doing a whole pile of plastics assessments to reduce these issues. Unfortunately, a lot of these companies don't have the funding to go from proof of concept to commercialization, and that's where the usual gap happens. So Ashley, thank you for being with us. Take it away.
Great. So let me just, I guess I'll share my screen. 1 second. Can you guys see that okay?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. So yes, thanks for having me today. And Harriet, thank you for the introduction. As Harriet just said, I lead Environmental Defense's work and campaign to end plastic pollution. Harriet kind of gave an overview of the organization, but yes, if you're not particularly familiar with us, we're a national organization and we're a leading Canadian advocacy organization. So we work with government, industry, and individuals to defend clean water, a safe climate, and healthy communities. Now, I'm sure all of you have seen images like this one, pictures from around the world of massive piles of plastic filling up landfills or covering shorelines. You've probably also read news articles about whales with bellies full of plastic bags, or maybe you've seen that really disturbing video of the turtle with the straw up its nose. We're kind of constantly being inundated with these images of plastic in the environment and how it harms and kills wildlife. And earlier today, Harriet asked if I was going to be doing a presentation similar to one we gave a few weeks ago. And that's the reason we gave a presentation, is because recent research is also beginning to show that there's actually plastic in our bodies as well. So it isn't just animals that are ingesting plastic, it's us too. There's plastic in the water that we drink, in the food that we eat. There's plastic in the air that we breathe. And increasingly we are becoming concerned about what those impacts could be on our health. But that will not be the focus of this presentation. So if you're curious about that, I encourage you to go to Environmental Defense's YouTube page and watch the recording of our last webinar, where we had some great guests talk a little bit about the new research in that area. So in Canada, only about 9% of plastic waste is recycled. Most of it is sent to landfills, and about 29,000 tons ends up in the environment. And a huge amount of that is single-use plastics, and a lot of that is packaging. So these are materials that we're usually only using for days, weeks, maybe months, but they persist in the environment or landfills for centuries. The good news is we have seen some progress on this file over the last several years, especially, I would say. In June of last year, the federal government announced plans to ban some single-use plastics as early as next year. They also announced that they would be working with provinces and territories to move towards something called extended producer responsibility, where producers would be the ones that were financially and operationally responsible for collecting and managing their waste. We've also seen some leadership with companies. Last year, Sobeys announced that they would be eliminating single-use plastic bags from their stores. Some beverage producers like Coca-Cola, Nestle, they have committed to minimum recycled content targets in their packaging moving forward. And Unilever, P&G are exploring new refillable packaging options for some of their materials. We don't have that in Canada yet, but they are piloting it in the US. It's a really cool initiative. It's called Loop. And basically you have your regular kind of items from them shipped to your house in refillable containers. When you're done, you put the containers back in this kind of cooler bag. It gets collected. Those containers get sterilized and refilled with product. Unfortunately, COVID has kind of affected this, surprise, surprise. Early in the pandemic, the US plastics industry lobbied to remove bans on single-use plastic bags, citing that single-use plastic bags were necessary for hygienic reasons. In Canada, the Chemistry Industry Association has used the pandemic to position itself as a hero in the fight against COVID and has been lobbying to block those promised federal actions, so the bans and the EPR strategy. And it's estimated that single-use plastic use has actually increased 300% since the pandemic began. And yes, some of that can be chalked up to an increase in PPE, but a lot of that is an increase in other unnecessary single-use plastics like disposable bags and excess packaging, an increase in e-commerce, etc. Unfortunately, also, there is no evidence that shows that single-use plastics are actually safer. In late June, over 100 doctors, scientists, and health professionals released a statement. These were health professionals from around the world, declaring that disposable items are no safer than clean reusables. First off, they highlight that the virus isn't actually really thought to spread from surface contact. It's mostly from like person to person and speaking moistly. But secondly, just because something is single use doesn't mean it is sterile. And any number of people could have touched on or coughed that broccoli head wrapped in saran wrap. Really what's most important is to be making sure that we're washing our hands and our bags and our cups, etc. And the fact is that the plastic pollution crisis has been growing for decades. It's been around long before the pandemic. It will continue to exist long after the pandemic, and we cannot allow one crisis to give us a free pass to make another one worse, especially now that we are beginning to learn more and more that these plastics may be having serious impacts on our own health. So this is also potentially a health crisis. So what got us here? So this is a very simplified diagram of kind of a linear economy. So you can see we take oil, we use it to manufacture goods, we use them, and then we throw them away. Canadians literally throw away about $7.8 billion worth of plastic every year. And the economics really enforce this. Oil and gas production is heavily subsidized, so making plastics from virgin fossil fuel resources is incredibly cheap. The costs of collecting and recycling plastic is quite high. So recycled content is actually often much more expensive than virgin content, and that means that many companies will preferentially choose virgin material unless they have a massive incentive to use recycled content. And dumping plastics into the environment is basically free. So companies don't have to consider the cost to the environment when they are designing their products. And here is a diagram of a super simplified diagram of a potential circular economy. So in this situation, instead of us kind of using materials briefly and then disposing of them, we are capturing those materials at end of life and turning them into other high value goods. So we've reduced our need for virgin oil, and we've also dramatically reduced waste. And I think an important thing to remember is that with the circular economy, this is fundamentally about more than just recycling. For one, recycling systems just aren't able to handle the volume and complexity of materials that are currently on the market. And for two, there are limits on the number of times that you can recycle something into another high value good or a good of similar quality and purpose before it needs to be downcycled and eventually landfilled. I've heard that on average, plastic can be recycled anywhere from like 2 to 7 times. But most of the time it's recycled into something of lower value, so downcycled, and then the next stop for that item is the landfill. And so for all of the reasons that I have mentioned previously, cheap oil, expensive recycled material, no costs for pollution, it's unlikely that a circular economy will just spontaneously appear. Really, Canada needs strong waste policies that hold producers responsible, that ban problematic plastics, and that dramatically increase reuse and recycling. So the first step is for Canada to add plastics to the Canadian Environmental Protection Act's toxic substance list. So the Canadian Environmental Protection Act is the law that the federal government has available to regulate plastics. This is an existing law. It's just really about adding plastics to that toxic substance list, and then they can put in place a management plan which would have other regulations that could impact the production, the use, and the disposal of plastics. This is the same law that the government used to ban microbeads. So those were the little plastic beads that we were seeing in our personal care products, things like toothpaste and body scrubs and that sort of thing. Those were banned a few years ago, and this was the law that they used to do that. Canada has done a science assessment, which is the first step in getting something added to the toxic substance list. That draft science assessment was released earlier this year, and surprise, surprise, it confirmed that plastics are toxic to the environment. So that means that they cause harm to the environment and the animals that rely on it. And that means that plastics can be added to the toxic substance list. So now we just need the federal government to follow through and propose a regulation to eliminate plastic waste. But what should be in that regulation? Well, First off, we do need to dramatically reduce the amount of plastic trash we're producing in the first place. This isn't a crisis that we can solve with recycling alone, as I mentioned earlier. And so this is a place where bans have a role to play, specifically bans that address the massive problem of single-use plastic items. Almost half of Canada's plastic waste is from single-use plastic items like straws, cutlery, bags, and other forms of packaging. A lot of this material is impractical or impossible to recycle, and is commonly found littered in the environment in Canada and around the world. So if Canada is really serious about addressing plastic waste, it needs to ban a variety of unnecessary single-use plastic items. Right now, also, there is a huge disconnect between the people who produce plastic goods and products and packaging and those that manage it. So in most jurisdictions across the country, it's municipalities that are the ones who pay for and operate recycling systems. But obviously, it's companies that are constantly kind of creating new materials, new complex materials, like multi-layer pouches or lightweight films that are incredibly challenging for our existing recycling systems to handle. So what Canada needs to do is work with provinces and territories to make sure that producers are the ones who are financially and operationally responsible for collecting and recycling their products at end of life. This is called extended producer responsibility, which I mentioned earlier. And as part of it, the government would need to set a minimum recycling target. And then producers would be responsible for achieving that target. If they didn't achieve it, there would be financial penalties or potentially other penalties, like depending, I guess, on how much they missed the target, maybe their ability to do business in the country. And what that does is it incentivizes producers to create products and packaging they know they can efficiently collect and recycle. It also potentially could incentivize producers to actually redesign their products or their packaging entirely, considering reuse instead of just recycling as an endpoint. But making producers responsible, as I said, only works if Canada sets and enforces actually high recycling targets. So these would be regulated targets that companies would be mandated to achieve, and they do need to be material specific. So I'm going to kind of take like a slight dip into another layer of government. In Ontario right now, they're currently working on a draft regulation for our recycling system, our curbside program, to transition it to an extended producer responsibility system. So instead of Ontario municipalities paying for recycling, producers will be the ones who pay for and operate that system. However, they are proposing to aggregate plastics targets into flexible plastics and like rigid plastics. And the challenge with that is there are a few rigid plastics that are very lightweight. I'm thinking of styrofoam, for example, that are going to kind of be put up in the same category as things like laundry detergent bottles, water bottles, and pop bottles. And it's very likely that producers will be able to accomplish their recycling target without having to address styrofoam at all. They could just prioritize collecting plastics that there are already end markets for, that are already easily recycled. And that doesn't actually solve the problem of having styrofoam in the environment, which we know is quite damaging. So ideally, the province working with the federal government would establish targets that were material specific. So there was actually a recycling target for styrofoam, and there is actually a recycling target for HDPE, and there's actually a recycling target for PET. And the same when it comes to lightweight plastic films, because that's the best way to incentivize producers to choose materials that are actually, they can actually collect and turn into other high value goods. And finally, this is something that Canada can do all on its own without the provinces or territories. Canada should be mandating a minimum recycled content target. This is something that the EU has done with their single-use plastics directive. And what it helps to do is create markets for that material that we are collecting and recycling. Because sometimes right now we collect it and recycle it for no one. No one actually wants to buy it because they'd rather buy virgin content. As I mentioned earlier, with a large supply of subsidized fossil fuels, it's often cheaper for companies to use virgin material instead of recycled material. But if Canada set a minimum recycled content target of, let's say, 50%, it would help stimulate demand for recycled plastics. And so that was kind of a brief overview of two of our most recent reports. The first one is Talking Trash, Canada's Plastic Pollution Problem, which kind of provides more of an overview of what's going on in terms of waste. And most recently in March, literally like 2 days after the pandemic was announced, we released our report, No Time to Waste. Bad timing for a report, let me tell you. And it outlines 6 policy actions that government can take to get Canada on track for zero plastic waste. So I would encourage you guys to check those out. They're on our website, which is environmentaldefense.ca. And I am available to answer lots of questions. I have a wealth of information that was not in those slides.
Okay, great. Harriet, can you see the questions in the chat? Or do you want to?
Okay. I can start because I'm muted. So Ashley, I thought that BC had passed some legislation for this extended producer responsibility. Is that true or false?
So that is true. BC was the first province to have like full extended producer responsibility legislation or regulation. It's several years old. It's considered to be quite successful, but the main challenges or the criticisms it gets is poor enforcement. And so if you have targets, but you're not enforcing them, it doesn't necessarily create the right incentive structure. And so folks that worked on that regulation and are now being consulted on the Ontario regulation are strongly suggesting that Ontario enforce and have like strong penalties for missing the targets, the mandated targets.
Okay, and on one of your slides, you showed the fact you can recycle some products, and I saw a T-shirt. But you know, there's a big issue with fleece and microplastics.
Mm-hmm.
I was curious to show that you were showing a piece of clothing. Are there plastics out there that will not yield the microplastics into our bodies and rivers and the environment?
No, actually, so far you're right. Basically, it's actually very common for producers to recycle their material into clothing, performance fleece, and even just regular polyester. And you are 100% right that does end up breaking down into microfibers and microplastics, which end up polluting our waterways. And that's actually a lot of what the discussion that happened a few weeks ago with my friend Chelsea Rockman, who's a U of T professor, and Rick Smith, who did that research to determine that there was plastics in his body. A lot of those plastics were from clothing fibers. So basically, no, that was a poor diagram. I apologize. But ideally, I guess if stuff is already made into plastic clothing, then I would rather that the plastic clothing be made into more plastic clothing than it just be dumped into the environment.
Okay. Yeah, that book by Rick Smith, Death by Rubber Duck, is well, I'm familiar with the whole area. So, but anyone who wants to read about how toxic our environment is should pick up that book with respect to toys for children. Mm-hmm. Okay, so first question: what can we do, Ashley, at the municipal level regarding legislation?
So I guess I assume that this conversation is from Vicky, because I seem to remember that you were the municipal contact, maybe.
Well, the question is from Carrie Hill, but so
okay. Well, I'll just explain. I mean, if you are an Ontario-based municipality, there is a very good opportunity, very good chance that shortly you will have very little say on what happens with recycling and waste collection. Well, maybe still garbage, but not recycling in your city because of the transition to extended producer responsibility. So the province hasn't released the draft regulation yet. They have only been doing kind of private stakeholder consultations with municipalities, producers, and folks that work in waste management. But between 2023 and 2025, all of Ontario's municipalities will roll over into the extended producer responsibility framework, and then they will be the ones who design and operate recycling systems.
So it is coming. Okay, Kim asks, and it's a good question, some packaged products we buy, many I suppose, are made and packaged outside Canada. How can we hold international producers accountable? And I guess that goes back to the P&Gs and whatever.
Yeah, so part of that will be, can be a result of the federal SEPA legislation. So if they declare single-use plastics toxic under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, and then they put in place a regulatory framework that has, you know, mandatory recycled content targets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you would be required to meet those two to have your product for sale in Canada. So an example of that is microbeads. When we banned microbeads, they're also banned from imports. So if you're a company that wants to sell your product in Canada, you cannot sell a product that has microbeads in it. And so if you're a company that sells shampoo bottle in Canada and Canada decides that shampoo bottles need to have 50% recycled content, then you will need to have 50% recycled content in your bottle. And the good news is that I think because the plastics issue is so global, there is a lot of momentum from other countries to do something in this area as well. And so we have heard from some of the companies like Unilever and P&G that it would be good for them if it was kind of like an even playing field. And if they're operating in a few different, well, many countries around the world and the rules are similar, it'll be easier for them to meet them globally.
So what can we do about all the toxic chemicals inside their products, inside those bottles? I guess that's...
You should talk to my colleague, Mohanad, who does all of our advocacy related to toxic
that's great,
personal care products.
So Michael's saying that, Michael Barre is saying that there are technologies that can convert plastics to diesel. As ED looked at, you know, working with or investigating any of those opportunities?
So yes, those technologies exist. Sometimes they're called advanced recycling or chemical recycling. And then there's also like energy from waste directly, where you like burn plastics and use it to move turbines to create energy. Some people think that that is a form of green energy. Environmental Defense says that that is not a form of green energy. It is still burning fossil fuels. It is still contributing to climate change. Sure, you're getting like one more use out of that plastic item instead of it sitting in a landfill, but it is continuing to reinforce a linear economy where we are relying on virgin fossil fuel resources to eventually provide us with energy. And so we're really nervous about some of the signals we've seen that I think government and industry is expecting that chemical recycling will kind of be like the savior and will help us to continue to create and use plastics in the same way that we are now. Because it's okay, we can just use chemical recycling at the end of life. But unless we're actually closing that loop and finding a way to turn those materials into other goods, it's not recycling, it's just burning, and you need to keep feeding that monster with more virgin oil.
Yeah, and as Mike says, and I've seen this in a number of technical proposals as well, that the key issue with reusing recycled mixed plastics to make other products or reusable products, for engineering purposes, it's impossible to guarantee their performance. And, you know, that's been one of the key issues for firms that are trying to do it, is from their municipalities, they're getting a mix of everything. And the most expensive part, in fact, is separating the plastics to divert what they can use and what they can't use. So Steve Isco asks, are fines paid by companies eligible? That's a good one, Steve. Be eligible to consider a business expense for tax purposes. That's something we want to put in the tax code.
That is a great question. And when I see the actual draft regulation and I see what the penalties are, I will make a note to actually look for that, but I don't know.
And hopefully Steve will get credit for this aha moment. So
Steve, look at the regulation too. Help me, inform me.
And it's interesting because I keep me, you know, Steve is one who wants to take a lot of action and be involved. And I have kept meaning, sorry, Steve, to point you to Environmental Defense, because they are so active on so many fronts that I'm sure you could be of great benefit to them if you'd like to contribute. Mm-hmm. Okay, here we go. Let me just scroll down here. What is interesting? What is Environmental Defense's position on Israel's SodaStream reusable home carbonization system to replace the use of single-use soda bottles? And that's from Leanne Wasser.
sorry, I'm just writing down Steve's note. I mean, our general, I guess, response would be that we don't tend to kind of like firmly stand behind any one company or product. I think that my response to that would be that if we can be doing things that reduce our reliance on single-use products, and we can instead be moving to like refill models, for example, like being able to refill a cartridge, like SodaStream does, then I think that's a step in the right direction. But I know that SodaStream has some other potential social problems. And so I'm not going to firmly say that we are like supportive or unsupportive of their business model.
Yeah, I mean, especially as a charitable organization, I believe you have to be very cautious on that front. And yeah, but I mean, as you say, anything you can replace is good. So Andrew Backus, hi, Andrew. Is it possible to create business-specific or institution-specific policy? For example, banning single-use plastics on university campuses, buildings, or music festivals and concerts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember, yeah.
You totally can. It's awesome. We are very supportive of that. There's a music festival that happens down here in Southern Ontario, in Guelph, usually most years, although that didn't happen this year, called Hillside, and they have been zero waste for years. They have a system where they have like water trucks you have to buy, or year to year you can bring your mug back, but it's like a Hillside mug that all of your water and other beverages are given to you in over the course of the time that you're at the festival. There's entire event planning companies that are focused on producing events that are zero waste. There are university campuses that have taken steps towards banning some single-use plastics. Even City of Toronto no longer sells bottled water in its facilities. So if they're having an event or they have a facility, they make sure that tap water is available, which also makes sense for a municipality, and that you would want to promote the fact that your water is good to drink. So yes, like you don't necessarily need to rely on municipal, provincial, or federal regulation. The reason why environmental defense spends a lot of time advocating in that space is because obviously it's an opportunity for broader, wider spread adoption of important environmental practices. It also helps to level the playing field. And as somebody mentioned earlier, when we talk about companies like Unilever, P&G, companies that are multinational but are also national, they sometimes but they have issues with different rules in different jurisdictions. So if you have a federal policy, a federal regulation that sets kind of the guardrails for the way plastics are produced or managed across the country, it actually makes it easier for those companies to meet their obligations in every province, as opposed to having some provinces that are more are rigid and have higher expectations, and some provinces that maybe haven't really considered the issue yet.
Liam Wasser, and this is not something that probably should be taken offline, because he wants to know about the technologies to convert waste plastics into fuels, which, as you say, is not really reducing the curve, so to speak. And he's working on some technologies. So I guess that would be taken offline, Leon, between you and Michael Barre, perhaps, unless you want to comment now, Ashley.
I mean, I could point you in the direction of a couple of reports that have been done by NGOs that are more focused on kind of the concerns about the existing technologies and where they fall short. Like, I guess, high level, most of what I've read suggests that these technologies have not proven to be scalable without either significant additional funding or a reliance on like additional virgin fossil fuels to run the process. Yeah. So they're either energy or financially inefficient. But I'm not an expert in chemical recycling. And so if there are folks in this group that are more into that, I'd encourage you to connect. And as I said, I can connect you with those NGO reports if you're curious.
Carrie Hill has asked the million-dollar question: how do we educate the public to use recyclables? And the only way to really do that, I suppose, is to start charging. I mean, I don't know how many people online here are charged for their garbage, but we get, I guess, one or two bags a week. We put out garbage once every 6 weeks. So unless people seem to be hurt by it financially, not much is going to change. But I'm sure, Ashley, you're living it, so you can maybe add some comments there.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that in general, individual action is important. But as somebody who tries to like walk the talk, it's actually quite challenging to actually, I'm sure you guys know this too, it's very challenging to live a low waste or zero waste lifestyle. And I also think that there's issues with equity and accessibility. A lot of zero waste products are marketed as like high-end luxury products and are not necessarily available to many folks in our communities. And so that's another reason why I think it's important to have the regulatory framework in place that actually makes zero waste or a circular economy kind of the default, so that we're not relying on individuals to like bring their own cups, et cetera, et cetera. However, I will say that I do think the public is very aware of this issue. We have some polling from our friends at Oceana that was done in June. It said that 86% of Canadians are still very concerned about the plastic waste issue in Canada and are supportive of bans. I can't tell you how many people wanted to talk my ear off at the beginning of the pandemic about how frustrated they were that they couldn't bring their reusable bags to the grocery store, that were like no longer getting coffees out in the world because they couldn't bring their reusable cups. So I think there is a lot of awareness. I do think the other thing that we can do is we can make it easier for individuals. So a lot of our reuse systems now rely on individuals, as I said, to bring their own container, bring their own cup, bring their own bag. But we're increasingly seeing reuse systems where a restaurant, for example, or a cafe will partner with a company that provides reusable containers. And you can take that reusable container and then return it to either that cafe or another participating cafe. There's a program in Quebec called La Tasse. And so you go to the cafe, you get your coffee, you pay a $5 deposit on your reusable cup, you enjoy your coffee out in the world, and then you return it to another cafe, you get your $5 back, or you can get another coffee in a new clean cup. And that takes the onus off the consumer to remember their container. And it also allows for those cleaning and sterilization practices, which we're particularly conscious of in a post-COVID world.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And I have heard of those systems. We just need more buy-in on that, for sure. David Heineman, please comment on the use of biological feedstocks for plastics and how this impacts waste. And I can tell you, David, that one of the biggest issues is capital to produce a plant that's working off algae or some level of plant byproducts that they use to create plastic. But I'll let Ashley give us the latest on this front.
Yeah, so there's obviously 99% of plastics are still made from fossil fuels. So there is about 1% that's made from other materials. Some of them are used to make plastics that are exactly the same as plastics made from virgin fossil resources. So an example of that would be like the Coca-Cola plant bottle. It's made from like 30% plant content, but it is PET. When it goes into a recycling system, it behaves like PET. But then there are containers like some of the so-called compostable plastics that are not PET. And some of the challenges we find there is that it's very unclear to consumers what they are and where they go. And when they end up in recycling systems, they dramatically reduce the quality of the recycled material because they are not recyclable. And many municipalities cannot actually handle them in their compost systems if they have compost systems. So a lot of these materials ideally should be disposed of in landfill. And unfortunately, landfills are not the most effective places for compost, since we know that we sometimes uncover like newspapers from 50 years ago or carrots from 30 years ago in landfills. So this isn't to say that these are not maybe a future solution, but right now they're not really working properly in the existing systems that we have. And one of the things we're looking to see in the Ontario regulation for recycled materials or packaging materials is a specific target for compostable materials and plastics, and a specific way that producers will be responsible for managing those outside of the existing system to make sure that they're being captured. I know I focused more on the disposal side than the manufacturing side, but I know that we do have some concerns about making sure that any of the material used to make plastics is not competing directly with food production. So obviously not an issue with algae, but could be an issue with some of the corn-based plastics and stuff like that.
Corn and yeah. Vicky Schmolk is asking and this is another one that we deal with every day, and you certainly do. When Kingston City Council was moving in the direction of eliminating plastic water bottles 10 years ago, response from plastics industry was swift and powerful. What a surprise. How can people who want to support plastics elimination, better management, help keep the momentum going to get the legislation we need? So what do you need us to do to get these federal regulations in place?
Reach out to your MP. Yeah, I mean, industry is a powerful beast. We run into that issue a lot. You know, we're like a small charity. We're not super small, but we're small. We have limits on the amount of political advocacy we can do because of our charitable status. Industry does not have those same limitations. And so, yeah, if you have concerns, write to your MP, write to the Prime Minister, write to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. But definitely write to your MP, because for the most part, and Ted, maybe you know a bit about this, but they want to hear from you. And if this is a concern in your area, they're going to be responsive to their constituents.
Okay, for Thomas Sears, and again, I don't know, this might be an offline situation, to my fellow engineers in the room about the performance guarantees. Is this an issue that we have not tried hard enough yet? Is there something that stops sufficient processing, testing, and certification from making recycled plastics an option? I think, again, it's maybe Ashley has an answer, but I know from what I've seen, the issue is the different grades of plastic, and they contaminate each other, and they have different breakdown levels, et cetera, et cetera. So, but Ashley, you may know more about this.
I mean, I suspect since there were some engineers in the room, you might know more, but I would say that my understanding is, yes, part of it is to do with contamination and sorting. But even if you have like a virgin stock of, let's say, all PET clear plastic water bottles, there is a limit on the number of times that you can recycle that before the actual like polymers shorten to a point where it doesn't have the same properties. So obviously, yeah, people could have different or newer, fresher information, but yeah, I thought even if we had a clean feedstock, it was only like 2 to 5 times before you need to make it into something.
When you want to be able to sell something to a client of recycled material into a new product, they want a performance guarantee. And if it's a mixed plastic, which you're not certain of how it's going to perform after 1 cycle, 2 cycles, or 10, you could get held accountable, liable financially if it doesn't meet that criteria. So that's why a lot of companies refuse to put recycled materials into a reuse.
And just to actually build on that too, we don't tend to focus on this issue as much, but my friends at HEJ Support, which is Health, Environment, Justice Support, and CELA, the Canadian Environmental Law Association, they spend a lot of time thinking about, we do know that some plastics have harmful additives in them that provide specific properties. And if those plastics are being recycled with other plastics, you might end up with additives you didn't intend to be in your material in a baby toy or in something else that's now been made from recycled content. So if we are moving towards a system where we are recycling more and using those materials to create new things, we need to make sure that the plastics we're using in the first place do not have harmful chemicals, or we're figuring out a way to get that stuff out so that we're not perpetuating those harmful chemicals in other products.
Yeah, and as Lisa Asbrook always used to say, you know, when the doors of Toys R Us would open, all you could smell is plastic. So she never went in those doors. But it's interesting with this EPR, the extended producer. To me, the only potential solution for federal regulation is to only allow certain plastics. I mean, that's the critical mass that we have to get to around the world, that there are only 5 or 10 types of plastics that are allowed to be produced. And then we know, as Mike says, performance guarantees, recyclability, blah, blah, blah. And that goes back to the producers. Is there any work being done on that front?
Not, I would say, super explicitly. The hope is that as it becomes clear that some of the materials that they're using, like let's say you make a package that is going to be, it is regulated under the packaging regulation, but it is not actually recyclable in the blue box, you would still have financial obligations to the blue box, but your material would not be welcome in the blue box. It would just go in the garbage. And so unlike a company that might have a financial obligation, but then gets kind of a credit based on how much material is in the blue box, you wouldn't get a credit because your material is not being collected. And so that would make using that material much more expensive, and hopefully would lead to producers moving away from that material and towards materials that can be collected and recycled efficiently. So that's kind of the way like the model is supposed to work to make that happen. But I have heard, so the federal government is supposed to put forward their proposed ban list in the next month or so. They're focusing primarily on plastics that they know are harmful in the environment, because that is what their science assessment found, and that's kind of like the limits on what they can do at this moment. But I do understand that there is an industry group that is looking at additional plastics that they might voluntarily phase out, recognizing that if they are taking on the financial and operational responsibility for plastic recycling, that these are materials that are going to be a huge pain in their butt. So it might be a bit of a combination of regulatory framework and voluntary action.
Yeah, I was just going to say, going back to Steve's elemental suggestion, anyone who's producing non-recyclable or is producing plastics that does not fit into the accepted list should get a huge tax penalty or not be allowed to claim their expenses, or however, whatever fiscal method pardon me, would use would do the trick for sure.
Mm-hmm.
We have to use fiscal methods to get these companies in line.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So from Antoine, we have talked about citizens' purchasing behaviors. What about their personal waste management at home? What is the best way to encourage efficient waste sorting without being too complex, which is discouraging to some? I come from Montreal, and recycling is very simple there, but is almost useless.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you say that, because over the years, we've moved towards single stream recycling in most communities, where you put everything into the same bin. It has overall increased the amount of material that we collect for recycling, but it has made recycling that material more challenging because of high contamination rates. And up until 2018, we actually relied on China mostly to do that complex sorting for us. We would pull out like the high value goods off top, and then Canada and Europe and the US would all send everything else to China, and they would do the deeper sort of the whatever was left in the material in the recycling bin. So generally, it is better for recycling if consumers are separating their stuff at source, and the more the better. I think I want to say Japan might have like 18 different waste streams that you sort your stuff into. I think that would not work as well in North America, because I just don't think that people will do that level of sorting. It isn't kind of part of our, we won't just kind of do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a tricky one. We are very supportive of systems like deposit return systems. When you talk about economic incentives, that is a way to encourage individuals to sort out their materials and take them for recycling, and that creates a cleaner waste stream. We see that in most other provinces in Canada. They have deposit systems for all beverage containers, and the recycling rates for beverage containers are way higher than what we have in Ontario. So maybe it's a combination of that, and maybe at least separating glass from the rest of our recycled content, because glass is a huge contaminant in our current recycling system.
Yeah, and as Leon said as well, I mean, there are technologies that burn, and I think they do that in Europe. And while it doesn't stop the carbon cycle as you discussed earlier, and especially because, as I know you're right, they usually need to use a new feedstock, gas or oil or some petrochemical to do the burning. But I mean, at least it reduces some of it. Okay, now it's okay. So first of all, happy birthday, Annabelle. And that is from Mark. So Annabelle has asked, when Ledno met with Mark Gerritsen MP, we asked if he thought single-use plastics federal ban would still be carried through. He wasn't very encouraging. Someone from the group suggested that we try and work to ban single-use plastics in Kingston, and she's asking, is that worth us pursuing?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm pretty confident that we will see a single-use plastics ban list in the next month, as I said, coming from the federal government. So, I mean, you never really know, but like my contacts have told me that we will see a ban list by the middle of October.
Okay.
So I might say just like take a pause and see if that happens before you push too hard with the municipal government. I also know that municipalities are really struggling right now because of COVID and because they have a lot of additional costs. And we were seeing some movement in the city of Toronto to move forward on some voluntary bans before COVID, and that has all basically been paused right now. They're also, because they're in this negotiation with the province and producers for the way the extended producer responsibility program is going to look in Ontario, they're a little bit like focused on that. So I do think that this is an opportunity that we might also want to pursue, but our strategy right now is to see what comes down from the federal government, see what comes down with from the provincial government, and then to look for gaps, and then probably push the municipalities to address any gaps we see after we see those two pieces of higher level legislation and regulation.
Yeah, somebody asked about the provincial government plan, and I know our current MPP Ian Arthur is the NDP environment critic. But do you have any comments about what's happening in the province of Ontario, given we have a conservative government?
Yeah, so this regulation will come under the Resource Recovery and Circular Economy Act, which was a Liberal piece of legislation written in adopted in 2016. They have already, so the provincial government, both under the Liberal leadership and now under the Conservative leadership, has already regulated some kinds of waste underneath that piece of legislation, including tires and e-waste and batteries. And this piece of regulation will now have been authored entirely under this current Conservative provincial government. This current Conservative provincial government has made it quite clear that they are concerned about litter as one of the environmental issues that they are looking to focus on. We have not been invited to the consultation. They have only consulted with municipalities, producers, and waste management companies. Ourselves, along with other environmental groups, have written to them requesting to be included in the process, and were denied. We have seen the decks, so we have an idea of kind of what their thinking is in terms of their core policy considerations. Some of it is good, for sure, but there are definitely still some issues that we see. And I would say one of the biggest issues is that they're really narrowly scoping this regulation to only address residential waste, which is like the existing Blue Box program, but only residential waste only accounts for about 1/3 of Ontario's waste. 2/3 of it comes from the IC&I sector. And so we have been kind of pushing or encouraging this government as much as possible to consider opening up the scope to address waste coming from all sectors.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we're going to move shortly to our sector news. A number of people have logged off, and they've thanked you for a very informative update and answers to many questions. But I guess my final question is, I was shocked to hear that a huge proportion of CO2 is contributed by the fashion industry. And I was wondering if environmental defense, you know, part of this is obviously the microplastics in the fleece, but is environmental defense doing anything in that area? Because it was like 20% of global emissions or something like that.
Yeah, so not like directly at this specific moment in time, but it has come up in our plastics conversations. I don't know if it's come up with the climate team. But yeah, I think it's going to be a growing area of concern. I said that about 47% of plastics go to single-use plastics, and I think one of the next biggest uses is actually fashion. And as I also said, some of that stuff is like recycled material because it's made from plastic water bottles, but really the clothing is just a step before it ends up being waste in the environment. So it's a concern. It's just not something that we have currently focused on, but hopefully we'll have the resources to do in the next few years.
Yeah, I just like some public schools and high schools when I was young, we should all be wearing uniforms, don't you think?
Uniforms made from materials that are not plastic.
Cotton or bamboo t-shirts, and nothing else should be allowed to be worn. Thank you so much, Ash.
I was just going to say one quick thing about that is that what's actually probably most important is just to buy less, like as much as possible, to buy secondhand, to wear things for longer, buy high quality garments, wear them multiple times. Fast fashion is a huge environmental.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I've seen. And I have stuff in my closet that's 40 years old. So, but anyways, fast fashion is the biggest issue. So for the women and men out there, no fast fashion. Thank you so much. We're going to, Ted, is it okay if we move on to the sector news?
And sorry, I apologize, but my toddler just came home with my husband. So if it's okay with you, I might actually, did you want me to stick around for this part, or is it okay if I dip out?
It's okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, everyone. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out. Harriet has my email.
Super. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah, a number of people have logged off. John Beard and Mike Barre. Ted, do you want me to go into the sector news?
Yeah, we can just quickly, in case people are interested in the news in the different areas.
I see Tyson is there. We haven't seen Tyson for a while.
Very good.
Or maybe that's a different Tyson. Fuel cells. Nope. If you have something to say, please unmute as we go through the topics. Transportation.
Hi.
Oh yes, Leon.
Okay, if you want to talk about fuel cells, obviously it should be known that Canada is the global leader. We are the Silicon Valley of hydrogen fuel cells, and one of the two major companies in that sector, Hydrogenics, is here in Ontario. They've gone through a major investment from Cummins, a large American generator company, equipment company, and they're looking at rapid expansion also in everywhere except Ontario. It seems there's a major initiative for hydrogen fuel cells in Quebec. They have plans for a government-sponsored network of hydrogen fueling stations, and the government's committed to purchase 50 hydrogen powered cars. In BC, the government's building with corporate sponsors, private sponsors, network of six hydrogen fueling stations. One of the big challenges in zero emissions sector is that the fueling and logistics has been a problem. So at least in BC and Quebec they have a plan. In Ontario we don't have one yet. There is though an initiative from Enbridge to convert their fueling station and power to gas complex in Markham into a fueling facility. So that's in the works right now.
Okay. Transportation. Nothing? We usually have a fair number of people commenting on solar, but some of the regulars are not here. So if anyone wants to comment on solar, you can unmute.
Again, I can contribute. Canadian Solar, based in Guelph, is actually now one of the largest manufacturers of solar PV systems in the world, and just had a meeting with the embassy, Canadian embassy in Tokyo, about their advocacy for Canadian solar in particular, and the Canadian solar PV sector in general in Southeast Asia and East Asia, and we're making inroads in those areas too, which historically has been an area of competition, not a market. So so there's good stuff happening in that sector as well.
Okay. Anyone else on solar? Otherwise, we'll go on to wind. Okay. How about geothermal?
Harriet, maybe I'll jump in if I can.
Sure.
So it's geothermal plus a whole lot more, and I forget which section it might go into best. Just for the benefit of the members still on the call, Switch was asked by the City of Kingston to provide technical comment on the Unity Spa project being proposed for up Battersea Road, and a major part of that was actually geothermal. Well, we saw that as saw the geothermal aspect as a major not business as usual, given the geology in the region. There was technical comment related to the SPA's interest in they're planning to do small wind, solar, autonomous vehicles to get around the site, geothermal, significant wastewater recycling and reuse. So quite an ambitious technical undertaking to support this SPA development. Anyway, Switch has provided some technical comment back to the city, which requested it because the council deferred the go-ahead to get some more community input. So Switch was tasked with providing some of that input, and if we'd had more time, it was like a week turnaround time to get it done, but if we'd had more time, we certainly would have gone out to our members to get an even broader brushstroke on the technical merits of what was happening. I see Thomas putting up his hand.
Hey, thanks for that, letting us know about that, David. I'm kind of wondering, is that something that all the membership can see, what the Switch board or whoever was part of it sent to the city? Because I've been following that development, and yeah, I'm hearing so many different things. I'd love to see what Switch thought. We
can certainly share that. I actually haven't had a chance to even get it out to the board, but we will discuss, do we just submit it to interested parties, or do we just get it up on our website for all to see? We'll figure that out, but thanks for the interest, and we'll make sure you get something. Leon.
So the president, the chair, sorry, of OSEA actually comes from the geo-exchange, geothermal sector. You might want to get his personal input on that. I can put you in touch with his name is Dan Goldberger, but I can put you in touch with Dan, and he has extensive experience in that sector for like 30 years.
Okay. As I said, we had a 1 week turnaround, so we really sort of shopped input around within the board. When I submitted the brief, I certainly put out that if they want more technical detail, we would go to our members and we can dig a whole lot deeper. So I thank you for the offer, and we'll see if the city wants to bite further.
Yeah, and we're actually starting a geo exchange is the proper term, right? As geothermals, using the hot stuff that they used in BC, Alberta. And there's a conference coming up, by the way, on geothermal and geo exchange next month in Calgary. But well, although it's virtual like everywhere else. We believe that the government might be slightly more supportive of geothermal and its life cycle benefits, because geothermal has direct GHG mitigation opportunities as opposed to wind and solar PV, which it does not have necessarily a direct GHG contribution, and so we're looking at advocating a little bit more strongly for that specific technology, because geothermal replaces natural gas, which is used for space heating, right, for homes and ICI, and so we think that we might get a slightly more sympathetic ear to that conservation measure.
Perfect. Thank you. Harriet, back to you.
Okay. Yeah, I think I was just typing an answer to Vicky Schmolka, who said, like, what Switch position? Basically, Switch doesn't have a position, right, David? I mean, they asked us about, the major issue in that area is hydrology. We're not hydrologists. We have provided some feedback on some of the renewables that they plan to use, and as Shannon said, yes, you can use those. We have lots of members that work in those areas. If they want assistance, generally what Switch has done, which is why we're not a charitable organization, is if there are opportunities with respect to this project, then we would give them a list of some potential members that could help in this regard. So that's how we've managed over the last 15 to 20 years. So, all right, water power. Nothing. Bioenergy. This was discussed today, and as I said before, great potential, but there are two things happening. One, highly capital intensive, for which there is very little money around to provide the capital. And the second blow is that the plastic industries, et cetera, have such strong lobbying power that it's going to be difficult, I think, for many of these areas to compete on a price basis, both price and capital.
I can add, Harriet, if I may.
Sure.
In Toronto, the main compost processing facility here, it's called the Dufferin Transfer Station, is right now in the process of being converted into a biofuel. So they're going to be producing biodiesel from compost directly.
Yeah, I think we do that. The former Scott Renewable, the city of Kingston, I believe, has that compost center. That's where all the green bins go, right? Yeah, I think we do that. But I don't know what the output is used for. Ted, would you know, or somebody online? The output from that particular plant, David? No?
I do know it's not used for methane capture. There is currently a city proposal for upgrades to the waste treatment system and the green bin program that it would be worthwhile to review because it has the potential to have green methane that can be used for natural gas to power city vehicles and so on. That's out right now.
Okay.
And certainly when I was involved with it, which was a few years ago, in relation to Queens, there was it was more about the compost at the end, and respreading that on the land, just getting it decomposed enough that it was good fertilizer.
Okay. Yeah, because it can be turned into biodiesel, et cetera, but again, there's capital cost involved and, you know, whatever permits. I know that our former member is in Brockville, you know, getting the permitting done, because the whole permitting structure municipally and also probably definitely provincially, and I don't know about federally, makes it very difficult for these new technologies to get approvals on a timely basis so that they can move forward and actually do something for the environment. But that's another discussion. And people like Ted in his role have worked in those areas, and I'm sure our governments, some people in our governments are working in that area. Okay, education. I don't think we have anyone on education. Conservation, which is kind of what we talked about all today, using less. Green buildings, putting solar panels on our houses and our zero emission vehicles, although that green building is more passive housing, et cetera, et cetera.
Maybe I can just say something. Rob Miller, one of our members, has been talking to a lot of people and sending emails around. He's very interested in electrification of housing, starting with new builds, which is it's a tough one because a lot of people like gas heat, and so from a marketing point of view, it's very difficult to suddenly stop building houses with natural gas. So I think that'll be, and then you'll in other jurisdictions, you get pushback from the industry as well. So it's going to be a tough question, but it's obviously one of the next steps in reducing greenhouse gas emissions is to get off natural gas in our homes, especially for heating.
I participated in a Bullfrog Power webinar this week, and one of the interesting perspectives was that their model is you pay them to basically make sure that there's green electricity or green natural gas going into the grid or pipe, as the case may be. And they said it's more efficient than actually putting rooftop solar collectors in for the electricity case. Just a perspective that I hadn't thought about.
Yeah, that's interesting, Mark. We had way back many years ago, we had Bullfrog coming to speak to us. And I tried to get, you know, given that they're supposedly working for all of us, tried to get some financial information, and I could not. And I feel a little uncomfortable, you know, with what they say they're doing and how they're making money off all of us. But on the other hand, they have been a sponsor of Switch's events, but without disclosure, I'm always a little wary.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing I wanted to say, and Rob found this, he does a lot of reading on Vox, is, you know, there's a plan out there that's been put about the electrifying the whole US from coast to coast to coast. And there's some articles that have been written about a zero emission plan that could be done within 5 to 10 years. Of course, it would involve upfront money, but then savings down the road. And it goes along the line of yes, we have to get away from fossil fuels. We have to electrify the whole system since we're all buying these vehicles. And the question is, it has to be government driven. It has to be driven by policy. It cannot be driven by us, you know, powerful in our own way, but definitely without policy, it won't work. Yes, Steve.
Yeah, that's called Rewiring America.
Yeah.
And it's very comprehensive, and it indicates that a lot of this can be done without even carbon capture sequestration. And it also points out that it is job intensive.
Yes.
It's a remarkable document, and it's a wonderful blueprint. If you pair that with the report from the Democrats on the House of Representatives Committee, both of these documents provide a lot of guidance that could easily be applied to Canada province. the rewiring one is really, really good.
Yeah, and I remember actually a natural sewage system using marshes. Now you need to have a certain amount of land to be able to cycle the waste from a house or a building through, you know, through all these stages. But basically, as the professor from U of T said, and he was pretty ancient, you know, we're using new technology that's only 4 billion years old. It's called the sun. And I mean, and Ian Arthur said this, and we're all saying most of what we need is already there. It's just a matter of policy to a large extent. So yeah, it's a really good report. I mean, I breezed through it. It's quite comprehensive. And maybe we should be sending it to Environment Canada and Climate Change. Maybe we should be sending it to all the federal government agencies. Steve, what do you think?
I agree. I've been working on a document that it provides all the sources for information. There are only 2 or 3 omissions which I have to work on, but it's a really powerful document. There are lots of other things out there. For example, one agency has cut energy use in the Empire State Building by 40%. And they think they can almost double that just with simple measures. Do things here. The policy we talked about, electrification, is something that was suggested by George Monbiot in The Guardian. I've mentioned this before, that when you have a choice between clean electricity and fossil fuel, the government mandates that you must use the clean source, the electrification. I know that I read that there's a possibility that in Ireland, they will ban fossil fuel furnaces, that you have to move over to heat pumps. That's the sort of thing. When you have a possibility that I would favor, for example, the phasing out of gas furnaces, fireplaces, in places where there is an option for electricity. Builders are prohibited from using it.
Yeah, and that's why they talk about policy.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
And that's our final thing, or you can slog wood like we do out in the country, but policy is critical. And I mean, it's the same as all of us who have electric vehicles. You know, what you realize is it's so much cheaper. I mean, with the heat of the summer and charging a 75-watt Tesla battery, our electricity's gone up $20 a month. Well, I don't think you can buy a lot of gas for $20. And I think, in fact, that the electrification of our society will yield all those savings and more. So, but we're at 9:30, Ted. So I will, if we've lost a lot of people, not Tyson. And Liam wanted to say something. Ted, I might turn it back to you at this point.
Yeah, I'll just, sometimes people are exchanging private messages or public messages, so I'll just leave the
thing on. Yeah, I can stay on.
I'll leave the Zoom. Yeah, I'll leave the Zoom call going. Harriet, you don't have to stay on, but I'll just leave it going, and people can.
Okay. No, I can stay on. I'm just gonna answer some emails here. Leon.
Okay, so thank you very much for joining us today, and our next meeting will be the first Friday morning of October, and we'll have an announcement on that very soon.
Yeah, I was going to say, we haven't confirmed the speaker yet, have we?
Well, it's probably going to be Otter Energy, I think.
Okay.
So it's a renewable energy company locally based in Picton. So we'll have a talk from them about the projects that they're doing.
And we even though we're doing things virtually, you know, we do have a certain level of fixed cost as a non-for-profit organization, such as our insurance, such as, you know, our platform for membership control, and you know, we welcome all of you who are not members to become members. It's a small amount of money, but we really appreciate it, because we don't take money from anyone, and as a result, We're self-funded by our members, and we try to bring you interesting speakers every single month, except for the month of, what is it? August, I guess.
August.
Yeah, okay. So everyone can unmute and chat and whatever.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I echo Harriet on please join if you're not a member. We hope these meetings provide value.
Yep.
If I could add 3 bullet points for the housing issue, the last one that was on the agenda. One is in this morning's Globe and Mail, there in the home section, there's an article about Geranium Homes, which is building a development that is said net zero. Second is, so that's in this morning's Globe and Mail. Second is the Canada Green Building Council has implemented a new net zero standard that you might want to take a look at if you're speaking to developers in your area. Third is the Sustainable Building Canada Green Building Festival, which is virtual this year, of course, is taking place on October 14th to 16th. You might want to take a look at that if you're involved in the house building sector.
Yeah, I mean, as you were saying, the geranium homes, the issue has been over time, Leon, that those builders that offer green options, if the consumer has a choice between a granite countertop and a green option, unfortunately, they're always choosing the granite countertop. So it isn't like even the builders that are trying to push the agenda forward are failing greatly because, until we educate consumers, then not much is going to change.
I have to disagree a little bit because some of the more progressive builders, and a couple of them are very major builders, Mattamy Homes in particular, which is doing a ZEV, zero emission development here in the GTA, and some of the other major developers, are recognizing that both sustainability, that means being able to be off grid in an era that where climate change impacts everything from flooding to tornadoes is increasing, has a value, and for those that can afford the higher initial first cost, and often the first cost premium is only about 5%, so it's not a big one. That's the cost of your architecture. Is that there is a market, and everywhere from Dockside Green in Victoria to Okotoks in Calgary to Ottawa, Windfield developments, and all across Quebec where they're more eco-friendly to start with. There are major changes happening in the housing sector, as reduced as it is right now because of COVID.
Yeah, I mean, I'm aware of Okotoks because I funded the technology that came out of Queens from Steve Harrison for Enerworks while I was an IRAP ITA, and we have an Enerworks system. So about a third of our hot water, especially in the summer, it's probably 80% in the summer and 10% in the winter, is done again through solar. And we have we have solar right across our rooftop. But if you look at a percentage of, those projects compared to the whole bloody country, unfortunately, it's still too small a portion, I think. But
it's like EV cars.
Changes are happening. You're right, Leon. Yeah.
Well, by the way, those SodaStream systems are available at Walmart, Canadian Tire, and Home Hardware all across the Kingston area, as well as the rest of Canada. And we haven't bought a bottle of soda in like 2 years. So.
Do you have shares in the company, Leon?
Nope. I just like it. And today's topic is plastic, and that's for me. You could have all the government policies in the world you want, but if that requires compliance and enforcement. But you buy a SodaStream just like you buy a Tesla, and you're off the system. You're no longer part of, you're not putting money into Shell and Petro Canada?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we used to, when I was young, which is a very long time ago, we used to get milk in bottles and, you know, paper bags we used to use for our groceries. So all that is possible and has been in our past. It's just there's no policing, as you've said, and there's no penalty. So until we get penalty and policies, not too much is going to change. And I just drink water from a glass that I put in the dishwasher because I don't like the bubbles, Leon.
Okay. See, SodaStream does carbon sequestration and right on your own counter.
Okay, there you go.
There you go.
I kind of wanted to ask a question, and I guess, Harriet, you're I think the only board member left. So it might be directed at you, but I'd be happy to hear from anybody who's on the call. So it's a little off topic, but it's kind of to do with the green building that we were talking about before and a little bit of electrification. So I'm a Kingston homeowner. I'm lucky enough to be someone that can own a house here in Kingston. Since moving in, you know, number one goal has been, let's update this house to be fully electric, right? Like, let's make this house as low impact as possible. So you actually might hear on my mic right now, I'm really lucky, the solar installation is happening today. So that's very fun. So there's a bunch of loud stuff going on upstairs, which is cool. I'm looking forward to taking the photo. Yesterday it was just rails and wires. Today it should be panels. But of course that's very expensive. I think I'm looking at about $25,000 for that installation. So that's a pretty pricey purchase. I have an electric car. Sorry?
How much was the installation?
About $25,000.
Yeah, well, for us, it was 55 way back a decade ago.
Of course. But how many people, like, you know, I have no kids, so I can take that 25,000 instead of putting it in an RESP, I can put it on my roof. There's that, but I've also been looking at all my other options. Someone mentioned getting rid of gas furnaces. So of course, I've got a gas furnace here. I've got a gas fireplace right behind me. I want to rip that right out. I want to call up Union Gas and be like, please remove your lines and stop charging me $25 a month for nothing. And then of course I've got my water heater, which is electric. So the problem I've been having in Kingston is trying to find people, companies in this case, that know these technologies and can replace these things for me without me being the one. Just like when I bought my electric car, I walked into the dealership and I was the one that knew everything about the cars and they knew nothing. There have to be companies. So for example, I called up Haven Home Care for those in Kingston. And I said, I want an electric heat pump water heater. Here's the Ream model that's right on the website. And they said, oh, we sell like maybe one of these a year. I have no idea what the pricing is going to be. And then they quoted me like $6,000 or something for a unit that on the American Home Depot site is like $2,000. I was, what is happening? So I'm just curious, is there any directory that I can go to with Switch, or is there any connections that can be made for where to go?
Absolutely, through our member list, which is on the website. Yep. You know, when you contact someone like a Rick Rooney, I mean, the nicest thing about environmental people is we all enjoy helping other people with respect to the environment, and unfortunately it doesn't always bring us money, but certainly if you look like it used to be that Renewable Energy of Kingston, which is now Brad used to do that, but Rick Rooney is our usual go-to.
Okay, so Rick with Quantum, that's on my roof right now. So. Okay. So,
but he'll be able to help you, I would think, with heat pumps and various things, because once you're in the industry, the other possibility is, as Leon said, have a look at some of the green builders, or mostly green builders like Geranium and Mattamy. I've heard of them. Okay. There's one in Ottawa that's doing quite the development as well. So some of them you may be able to source some information on heat pumps and how to do all that. But good for you. But it can be frustrating, eh?
Well, and this has my wife and I wondering about, so I know that Switch, well, I shouldn't I've been with Switch now, like attending for about a year and as a member for about a year. And my perception is that Switch is trying to be a little more industry focused, like industry partners coming together to collaborate as opposed to community member focus. But I see this opportunity for a list for homeowners that says, here are the things you can do ranked by price or something and effectiveness, to lower your carbon footprint. Just as simple as that. And then my parents who know nothing could go down the list and be like, oh, we can afford that one. That looks good. Boom, buy it, and make it really easy for people to try to be better. Because it's, for someone who's even interested, it can be frustrating and take months just to get anywhere, so.
Yeah, I mean, the question again, and thank you for being member, is none of us are getting paid for any of this. And the reason we can't be a charitable organization is because we are like an industry association, but we do more than just businesses. We're also into the education and the technology with the university and St. Lawrence College. And, obviously we can't get political because that would hurt our mandate, but maybe a webinar of, we have done this in the past. I don't know if you were aware that we had what was called Managing Energy conferences when we could still be together. And in fact, we would have a little trade show of all the people that the public could go up and ask those questions. And so I don't know about a list. It's something that would be value added. And we have a lot of resources. So I'll take it to the board. It's a good idea, Thomas, whether we do, because I know Environmental Defense and a few other charities are doing webinars that cost $10 or $20, and that's not an onerous amount for anyone. So maybe we should do something like that. Do you like that idea?
Oh, I mean, that would be fantastic. Any sort of outreach, especially right now, people are just like looking for things, especially on home improvements. You go to Home Depot and there's no wood left, right? Everybody's just tinkering in their house while they're inside. So if you told people, hey, insulate a little better while you're at it.
Well, I was just going to say, I waited 20 years for my granite countertop because first we did the insulation and we did the energy audit and we did new windows and we did everything that makes the house tighter. And then finally I got my granite countertop. So
there's an electrical contractor that I've come across, Ken Edwards from I think it's called the Electrical Doctor. I think he's actually just outside Kingston. I could put you in touch with him. He's been involved in green projects for many years.
Wonderful.
So, here, what
Thank
I'll do,
you.
Thomas, I'll just send you his email address.
Oh, awesome.
Through the what do you call it? Through the chat.
And that's where the collaboration comes in, because we needed to put a charger in for the Tesla, and I got a quote from an electrician because they wanted to upgrade from 100 to 200, and we have this garage that has a room above it that has electrical space heaters that we never use, and so we had to, we turned off those ones. But of course, if we sell the house, we'll have to do something. Anyways, $3,000 or even more. And I knew that the guy who I bought the granite from owns a Tesla. So I sent him an email and he referred me to an electrician that used to work for a company here. And he did it for a $325 transfer. So we have like a 240 volt, we have a dryer type outlet in the garage. Of course, those other breakers are off. And yeah, it was plain and simple. So thank you, Leon. It's amazing how through referrals we can.
Yeah. One of the things I'm sure you have the net meter. If not, you should be looking at a net meter so that you can charge your EV directly from the roof, when, especially these days when your cars are sitting outside all day when the sun is shining. So you could and electricity is the most expensive, right? Even now. So I want to take a look at the net meter registry with a three-way connection.
Well, is Thomas, have you signed up for net metering?
So that's what, I mean, that's what you have to do, right? So it's going to switch over. That's all being handled by Quantum, thankfully. Like, so it's great.
Okay.
I just have to hand someone money and then things change. But
Okay.
but yeah, so it's no longer time of use or anything like that, right? It just becomes like the two-tiered system. So it's kind of funny. It would be awesome if it was time of use with solar, because then you would generate solar when it's most expensive and then consume in the evening.
Mhm.
That's not what they give you, because there's no, and maybe this is actually something that someone should push for, but apparently there's no two-way meters that are time of use that are certified in Ontario or in Canada for use. So it's like a stats can thing, or it's like a national standards thing. So
It's CSA, but right now, because of COVID and the fact that cars are now staying at homes, during the peak period, you've actually got a bonus this year that otherwise you wouldn't, because most people otherwise charge at night. Or if they don't have their car plugged in when the sun is hottest and the electricity is highest. I've got to actually check out, in case any of you are interested, at 10 o'clock, OSEA, and I sent a link about it right at the top of the comments list, is having a forum on exports because of the current government. Well, there's very little support, as you know, for projects here in the province, but OSEA has made a big push for global sales by Canadian and Ontario technology companies, but also consultants. And this is our second series of forums on exporting in conjunction with Global Affairs Canada.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us, Leon, and thanks for all your input. It was most helpful, and hopefully some of our people will join you at 10 and you'll join us again sometime.
Well, I'd love to, especially now that I could get there virtually and I don't have to drive and arrive at 8 o'clock in the morning in Kingston.
Yeah, for a while there, yeah, I know it's tough. For a while there, Ted was trying to stream it on Facebook, but we had some issues. So I don't know how we'll be moving forward. So.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Leon.
yeah, thank you, Leon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. And thank you, Harriet. Those really good answers. Another good meeting. And I'll I'll see you guys in a month, I guess.
Yes, we'll see you in a month. I think we're just about, I think Eric is still there, although not speaking. But I think it's just the three of us. Ted has left the building. I mean, he's left the connection.
Yeah, he's literally left us at his chess game.
But he's clearly working on other things. So I think I'm ready to move on. How about you, Eric?
For sure.
Yeah, me too. I've just been looking everything in.
All right. Well, I'll send a little note to Ted that we've logged off, and have a great long weekend, everyone.
All right, you too. Take care.
Everyone.
Bye.
Have a good one.
All right.